Okay, so I'm going to tell you a funny way to describe some seats at, let's say, a concert or a football game or something that are not the best seats. So let me uh, let me start by talking about. So, well, before we get started, I want to remind you to like the video, uh, comment, and subscribe. Okay, so like we have this thing in the mountains where we get a nosebleed, which is uh, when blood starts coming out of our nose. It's called a nosebleed. And it's caused from going high up in the mountains. And it says nosebleeds can be caused by being up in a very high altitude. And the oxygen decreases and it makes the air thinner and drier, which can cause the inside of your nose to crack and bleed. All right, so let's just tell a little story, a true story. Okay, when I was in college, I went to see this concert. My home state is Illinois, but it's the closest city is St. Louis, Missouri. All right, and it was in 1997. This was their first reunion tour after a long, long time. I was so happy. So back in those days, in order to get a ticket, you had to go to a music store and you had to stand in line. But in order to stand in line, you had to buy somehow get line tickets. So you had to get a ticket just to stand in line to get the tickets. And ticket scalping, which means when one person buys a whole bunch of them and then they sell them at a higher price. Anyway, scalping was really allowed, right? And so I got my line ticket and I stood in line at the record store to get two tickets, one for me, one for my buddy. And my buddy said he wanted to go. And so it's always more fun to go with somebody else, right? So I stood in line, and just as I started to get to the window, the line stopped. And everybody's like, "What? What's going on?" For a long time, you don't really know if there's something that's going wrong or if it's just taking longer than you thought it would. And I stood there in line and I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe I'll be okay. So when I finally got up to the counter, I had a choice of taking some very bad seats, and then I didn't know if my buddy was going to be mad if I didn't take them. I wanted to go no matter what, but I thought if I get these bad seats, my buddy's going to be mad, right? Because he's given me money, right? And then he might say, well, "Why did you do this? I wouldn't have taken these." Uh, so let me explain to you exactly how it happened. So I literally, so this was in the Kiel Arena, okay, and this is not my ticket, but this is like what the ticket would have looked like. Okay, $35. That's still kind of expensive, isn't it? But this is the Kiel Arena, okay, and it was probably not set up so that like the people back here could not be seated because the stage was like here, right? And I'm not kidding you. Like I was actually See how this guy is standing? We were in the very last row. And people don't believe me when I tell them this, but I could literally touch the ceiling. Touch the ceiling. And this kind of seat, even down here, but this is definitely what they call nosebleed seats. These are called nosebleed seats. So where were you sitting? Oh, yeah, they were nosebleed seats, right? This even down here they would call these nosebleed seats. So actually, I saw a sumo match in Tokyo, in Ryogoku, Japan, and I had nosebleed seats. You couldn't get anything else. So it's just a funny way of saying you got bad seats. Now here's another story. When I was in Austria, I wanted to go see a symphony because Austria is famous for having being a kind of a central place, a kind of a what we would say a Mecca, which means the kind of the center of the world for classical music, right? And so I was in Vienna, and I went, and I'll never forget this because, like, let's say, for example, in Japan, if you walk up to some of the staff and say, do you speak English? They're more than likely to say, just a minute, and they'll go get somebody. And even sometimes in airports, they literally don't have an English-speaking person. So, but I walked up to the ticket place in Vienna, and I said, do you speak English? And she said, yes, of course, I speak English, right? And so it's just the different levels. And as you see, as I made another video, Austria is the second country in the world for speaking English, right? And the Netherlands is on the top, all right? So, but anyway, so I said, I want to get a ticket, right? And she said, oh, well, it's not likely that you're going to, maybe you should go to a concert that's in another couple of weeks because it's not likely you're going to get very good seats. Maybe you should wait. And I said, well, I'm not going to be in Vienna very long, right? And she said, well, we have this one concert. I said, okay, I'll take it. And she goes, oh, we've got some front row seats. Okay, so if you go to a rock concert in America, let me get the Kiel Center back up here. If you go to a rock concert in America, they're probably going to have a stage down here, and then they will have some seats here, and everybody's kind of standing up. And the front row seats are near the stage, right? And you can get a very good look at the performers, right? And they're back a little bit, all right? And that's what you sort of expect when you, like when she said we've got some front row seats, I said, all right, front row seats, right, to this symphony. And but in the old, like Austrian symphony houses, the front row seats is not what you want. Because it doesn't, first of all, it doesn't have time for the sound to blend, but that's not the biggest thing, is that literally the front row seats were like this. Like the stage was like this. And I could just see like the shoes, see everybody's shoes, right? So anyway, not nosebleed seats, but definitely not good seats. So word to the wise, if you go to Austria to a very classical opera house, you might want to think twice about taking the front row seats. And they were cheap, right? I didn't think anything, I was like, oh, the front row and they're cheap. This is great, okay? But the reason why they were cheap was because nobody wanted them, right? And and then we have this idiom, sticking out like a sore thumb. I'll make another video about that if I haven't already. Sticking out like a sore thumb. So I was this American tourist in blue jeans. When I went to the concert, American tourist in blue jeans. And because you can't take all kinds of clothes, right? You got to take some clothes that are going to have a lot of different functions and travel light. So, and knowing me, I was probably wearing a baseball cap, right? So I'm sticking out like a sore thumb because not only am I sitting in the front row, but everybody there was dressed fancy. Why? Because you're going to a symphony. But, you know, they forgave me though. And I'm one of these people that at that time I had this purely American frame of mind, and I talked to strangers a lot. You know, what did you think of that, or whatever, just make jokes and stuff like that. But then after I lived outside of America, I realized that not everybody's like that, right? And, you know, the Germans were friendly though, or the Austrians were friendly. They'd actually talk, but they were a little taken off. But Japanese people never do that, right? And so I'm sort of out of the, well, I'm out of the frame of mind of thinking that everybody will make jokes with strangers like I did. Anyway, long story short, nosebleed seats are seats that are very, very high up. I'm telling you, I'm not joking. I could touch the ceiling. That's how bad it was. And there was actually, I think, it seemed like there was actually people still smoking inside, if you can believe that. So all that smoke rose up, you know, they were smoking weed, number one, but they were also actually smoking cigarettes. Can you believe that? It's weird how times have changed with all of that smoke, and I was just in this cloud of smoke, but I was still happy to be there. I was happy to be there. Okay, so I will talk to you on the next idiom. Like, comment, subscribe. Bye-bye.